Welcome back to the LinkedIn clone. In this video we'll be working on the friend request system on the front end. So in the previous video we've set up the tables. So I've created 5 users here. The first with the Angular image, and we've also got our table for our friend request. So if we go to user 2, as we're logged in as user 1, and we look at his profile, we see that they got a profile page and it navigates to the ID home/the ID of that user. And there's also the ability to connect, so you can send a friend request to this user, and if you click connect here, it grays out the connect button. And if you take a look at the Postgres database and you refresh the table, we see that the ID of 1 created the friend request to the ID of 2, and the current status is that it's pending, hence why it's grayed out here. And of course, if I was to go back to this user 2, it's still in that nice state there. And of course I could go to user 3 and send a connection to user 3, and if I were to log out and then sign in as user 3, for instance, we can see that if we were to take a look at user 1's profile, we get this grayed out option here saying to accept requests. Now in the next video we're going to set it up so that the navigation bar will have a popover component, and then we're able to handle the request that we got. But this is all about setting up the infrastructure to create the request, to accept the request here. And also if I was to go to say user 5 here, I could go ahead and connect to him, and then we should see the changes propagate to our database here. So we see that we've got the first user added the third user, and the third user has added the 5th user. So let's go ahead and get started. And we're going to need to make a small change to the back end, because in our application there is the ability, if for example in this database here, we can see that if you're logged in as user 3 and you're looking at user 1 profile as we did before, you get that waiting for approval message. So I just need to tweak the back end to allow for that. So let's go ahead and open it up, and I'm going to go ahead and drop the tables because this was from a previous the demonstration, and it has slightly different table names for my case. So I'm just going to go ahead and drop these for my case. They will be auto created anyway when you start the application, but I just don't want any conflicts in names to occur. So basically what I want to do is I want to go to my API, and in the source file, in the folder there for auth, we see that we have the auth module here, and then we have this user controller here. And this user controller, we have the ability to see the status of the request in the get friend request status function here. So if I go ahead and press F12 here, I'll navigate to the get friend request status method. So what I want to do here is I just want to tweak this slightly. So basically we're going to have a receiver ID and the current user. So if you make a friend request to somebody, you need the ID, which is going to be taken from the Angular route, and the current user is attached to the request through the JWT. So what we're doing here is we're just finding that user of the receiver ID, and we are going to find that particular user where the creator is equal to the current user, or the receiver is going to be equal to the receiver here. So I'll put this in here. And I'm putting it explicitly like this because we also want the reverse, and then we want to handle it. So it could be that in this example, user 1 has sent a request to user 2, but the front end wouldn't be able to tell based off this query. We also want the reverse if that was true. So we want to detect if the receiver ID is 1 here and the creator ID was 2, and that would just mean someone else sent the request to you if you're logged in as user 2 instead of user 1. So what we can do here, in this find one method here, we have the ability to have multiple where clauses. So we want to search for one or the other. So what we can do here is we can just go ahead and cut this, and we'll keep it in our buffer. But inside the object, we can add the where clause. So, and we can also specify 2 different scenarios here. So we can have an array, and then you can just go and paste this object in here like this, within an object. So that's one scenario, and I'm just going to go ahead and paste this again here, and just get rid of this comma here, and go ahead and put this all in the object again. So I'll save this, but this time I'm going to swap the scenario over such that the creator is the receiver and the receiver is the current user. So this isn't finding both cases. If you wanted to find both cases, you would need something like this. So this is the creator is the current user and the receiver is the receiver. And having a second object here is OR. So if that and that, or that and that is true, then it'll go ahead and find that record. So if you made the request or you received the request, you'll be able to find that particular row of that friend request. And the current user and receiver, they are both foreign keys to the user table. So we just need to have a relations here. And we're going to have our 2 relations. So we know that we have the receiver and the creator. So you can just go ahead and put the creator in here and also the receiver. And that's just the name of the inside of the actual table itself. So we've got creator and receiver here. Now it just tacks on the ID there because it's a foreign key relating back to the user ID. But we know that this is the creator and the receiver here. So we get our friend request, and what we want to do is we don't necessarily want to just return whatever the status is from the friend request. We need to handle a certain situation here. So what we'll do, and I'll open up the friend request status type here. I'll press F12 because we do want 2 more types here. We want the case when something is not sent, and we also want the case where we're waiting for current user response, as we've seen in the demonstration in the beginning. So not sent obviously means that either party or either connection hasn't sent a request. Pending refers to the currently logged in user. If they've sent a request, they're waiting for the other person, and you could potentially name these better. But But waiting for current user response is the reverse scenario. So if you're waiting for the current user response when you're looking at their page, well, you can just go ahead and accept them, and that's how we that's as we were prompted in the demonstration. And then of course you could either accept or decline the request here. So I'll just go ahead and save that, and then I'll close the file for the interface here. Also don't need the controller. So what we'll do is we'll return to the service here, and in this switch map, when we get the friend request, before we were just getting the ID and the status because there was no relation to the user table, but now we have these relations, we're able to do a check here. So what we'll do here is we'll just have a if condition, and we'll say if the friend request that we have, that we found from the database, just a row in the database, if that exists, and it may not exist, so we'll chuck on this Elvis operator, and then if the receiver, if their ID is equal to the current user's ID, that means that you get a record from the database here. This is an old version, but it will demonstrate the point. If you have the receiver ID here being equal to the current user, what we want to do in that scenario is we want to return an observable of this shape here. So we'll copy this here, and we'll just go ahead and we'll get that status as this is the new status that we created. This is the waiting, and I'll just go ahead and get from here so I don't make any typos. This is the case where we're waiting for the current user response. Now it's going to complain here, but what we can do is we know the type of it, so we can just specifically say this is going to be the friend request status type here. So just to confirm, that's the friend request status type here, and this is the scenario where if we're logged in and someone else has sent a request to us, then the current user that we're logged in is waiting to respond back to that person. So that's that case there. But otherwise, we would just want to return the status, which is just the friend request status. And I'm just going to go ahead and tack on this Elvis operator here for type safety, because that might not be defined. And if it isn't defined, that means that there's nothing sent. So we can just say nothing, not sent. Because if you get a row here back, if you're looking for, say, user 1 sent a request to user 5, well, the creator with the user 1 hasn't sent a request to user 5, and 5 hasn't sent a request to user 1. So in either scenario, when we get back the one record or the one unique row, that friend request won't exist. And if it doesn't exist, then we just go ahead and we just say, well, it's not sent. And that's all I want to do on the back end. So I'm going to just close that up. And I'm just going to go ahead and cd into the API folder so I can run the npm run start dev command here. This will start the server. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to close this file here, and I'm going to refresh my SQL here. Now I'm going to close this as well, but I'm going to reopen the user table, and I'm also going to open up the request table. So of course I've just deleted 5 users. I deleted the table, so I'm going to have to create 5 users again, but just to ensure the shape of the tables are there. There we go. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to quickly create 5 users here. So I'm going to have, and here I've just tried to log in. I actually need to register before doing so. So let's just get our logins going. So there's 1, here's 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's got Joe, but okay, doesn't matter. 5. So now if I look at my user table, and you can see I got a different name of this table. We've got our 5 users here, and if I view this, I've got an empty table here, and I'm just going to add an image in for the first user here. Actually, I'll do that later on. And I was just looking at the table here. Got a different name here. It was connection before, now it's request. That was just in the demo though, so it'll be the same as it was. But I can more or less just close these up now and open up the front end. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this part here. Actually, I'm going to open this file here from the back end, and I'm going to copy that into my front end. So I can actually just run a Control Shift tilde, and that'll open a second terminal up. And I can just go ahead and CD into my LinkedIn project here. So what I want to do is I just want to generate a component and a couple of services here. So let's just open up the folder structure to see where we want to generate this. So in our home folder, that's where we have the that's where we're going to have our user profile. You could have it in a separate file, but I've got our home page and our profile in this home folder, and then I thought, you can just easily use the components within there. And I basically want a friend profile here, or connection profile. So I'm just going to run an Ionic GC home / components / connection profile. And we can see in our components, we've got this connection profile here. And we'll just check that added it to the module here. So if we go to the app module, we can see that, if we look at the home module, we would be expecting the connection profile component to be here, but it's not here. So let's go ahead and add that. So that's just the connection profile component. Now there was also an error in the popover component where in the home, in the header, I believe, in the popover component here, we're getting this error here, and that's just because we didn't add it to the module. So let's just go ahead and get that popover component in here and save that. And now we can see we can use all the Ionic element tags. So it was working before, but it was a little bit of a hack. But now we've added that to the home module here. We can go ahead and continue to get what we need. We can generate services. So we can go ahead and run an Ionic GS, and in the home module, in the services folder for that connection profile component that we just created, we're going to need a service for that, because we can't just copy and paste our profile summary component, or we can copy parts of it, but it's going to rely on different data, and it's also going to be size different and anything. So you could refactor that into a more generic component, but it's just as easy just to create a new component based off that one. And also I'm going to need one more service, and it's going to be the banner color service, because if you have a look at the profile here, we see we got this backdrop here, and that's the same as the other profile component. So I'll just refactor that part into a service. But other than that, it's a different layout. The data is going to be different. There's potential to refactor into one component, but I don't know. It doesn't really seem worth it in this case. So we have our components ready to go. We have our services ready to go. We can go ahead and delete these spec files here. We don't need these. So I'll delete that. You could, of course, use the skip test at the end of the command as well in the Ionic CLI. But with that, we can start to work on the logic a little bit. So a good place to start is just creating the link to the page. And for that, we'll need to look at our routing module. So in our home module, we have this home routing module. And all we want to do here is just have another one of these. So we'll just copy that down. And we just want a dynamic path to the ID of that particular user. And rather than rendering the home page, we're going to go ahead and just render that newly created connection profile component. And we're just going to need to import that. So now we can run our Ionic serve command, and that will just load the serve up for the front end. And one thing we might want here is we might want to use the app header, and we probably refactor that, or in the next video where we deal with the friend request here. So right now there's no post or anything like that, but in the next episode we'll refactor the header to handle the friend requests, and then we'll refactor that at that stage there. So it says I'm logged in as user 3 here. I think what I want to do is I might just create some posts here, and I might log in as user 1 to do this. So I'm just going to sign in here. I'm also just going to get this image here, and I'm just going to start a post. This is a post, and that's a post from user 1, and I might just do this for all of the users. So probably a faster way to be doing this is to log in as user 2 in Postman, copy the JSON web token, go to the route. And I might just pause the video. I won't make you watch all of this, but just note that this is what I'll be doing. Actually, I might do one and then just leave it at that. So if I just refresh the page, there's user 2, and I'm going to do the same thing for the other 3 users. So you can see that I've created 5 posts, 1 for each of the users and 2 for John 2. And what I want to do is I want to add the ability to click on here and navigate to the user's profile page. So if I go to the all post component, I can open that up with a Control P, go to the all post component, and we can see that for our posts, we're looping through all of the loaded posts, and we have access to the post and the author. So that means we have the ID. So that means on the Ion avatar on the image, we can go ahead and we can make it look like you can click on it by adding the cursor pointer property. And we can also use the router link. And what we can do is we can point towards, so we want it to be based from the home or the root. We want it to be in the home, and then also, since we have the post author, we can just go ahead and put the post author ID in. So we also want to copy this, and we want to add it to the name, so you can click on the name as well. So on this div with full name here, we can just go ahead and Control V and save the file. And of course we'll save this file as well. So that means we can now click on this, and we can now click on this. So if I was to click on John 5, for example, we see that we got this navigation bar, and we got our page here. So I'm just going to go ahead and press F12 so we can see any HTTP requests and console logs. But before I even work on this component, I do want to refactor this banner colors out. So if I look at that profile for that, so that's the profile summary component here. What we can do is we can go to the TypeScript file, and we basically want to take everything relating to the banner colors out, and we want to put it into our server. So I'm just going to close a few things up here. You don't need all of these open at the moment. So what we can do is we can go to our banner color service, and we can just take this type of the banner colors and just cut that out and put it above the component here. And it's good to make this component a little leaner anyway. We could probably do the same thing for the image upload as well, a little bit at least. However, I think this is fine. We can come into our component here, get our banner colors. These are the default colors, because recall, if you're logged in as a premium user or an admin user, the backdrop color banner colors will change. So we cut that out. So this line will stay here, but it's going to relate to the service, and that means when we use it elsewhere, it will be consistent. So let's just go ahead and cut this private method out here, this get banner colors. And we'll go ahead and we'll paste it into here. Now we're just going to remove this private keyword here because we're going to use it elsewhere, but we will need to just get the role. So we'll get the type of that. So okay, so we've got that there. So we've got the banner colors object with the typing and then the function here, and then all you need to do is pass in the role. So that's essentially all we need to do in the refactoring of that. So that means we can come to our profile summary TypeScript and just inject into the constructor banner color service. And we'll need to bring that in, so we import that. So, and I'm going to make this public actually because we're going to use it in the HTML file. So rather than this.get banner colors, we're going to refer to this.banner color service .get banner colors, and we're going to do the same thing here. So we can refer to the property on the service itself. And we pass in the role, and that determines the colors. So we can just use this here in our component, in our template, and we don't need the this keyword, so we can just go ahead and actually I think we do need the this keyword, so we can just go ahead and type this in like this. Okay, just an extra dot there, and if I save this here and reload, we see that nothing has broke, so everything's all working fine and has been refactored into the service. But that means when we go to another profile here, we will be able to use that. So let's begin to work on the actual layout of the user's profile page. So I'm just going to do a Control P here, and I'm going to open up the connection profile component, the HTML here. And I think what I'll do just to get started is I'll just copy the HTML from here over, because it's going to be kind of similar, but I'm just going to nest this in an iron content component, and then I'm just going to go ahead and put all this in. Now we're not going to have the divider, and we're not going to have that much in this iron card content other than our buttons. So let's just go ahead and get rid of that. We're not going to need this input for the file select. So what we can do firstly is we can just get the service in so this won't error. So let's go ahead and get that. And we can actually do it in the exact same way as we did it here. So we can just copy that from the constructor here. And just bring that in. And I should get rid of the template errors. Now we don't need to set it because it's going to be set through the template here. So I'm also going to copy through the SCSS. And I'm just going to go ahead and delete this test file. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this CSS, and we'll take out what we don't need. Obviously, you could refactor this as well, but things are a little different. Even though it looks quite the same, you'd have to spend some time refactoring it, and that's just a decision you need to make depending on how you wanted to be doing it. But since this is just a demo application, I'm not going to make it into a production application. I just want to focus more on unique concepts rather than iterate repetitively over things that we've already done. And we've seen how we can do that all throughout the course. So basically, in the connection profile SCSS file, just go ahead and copy that in here. Now we're getting a couple of errors here. Profile. Okay, so we want to get rid of all of that there. And we will want to get the user. So I'm just going to go ahead and comment one of them out. So I got the properties for later. But right now, yeah, I'm just going to comment out the image here. And I'm also going to hard code this name here. So let's see where we're up. Okay, so now we see that we got a component similar, but it's missing the image and it's got the hard coded data here. So let's just go ahead and get the user. So we have our service. So let's go ahead and work on that. So we've got our connection profile service, and we no longer need to have the banner color service open. We've seen that that's working all right. So in the connection profile service, we'll work on the get the connection user. So we're going to need the HTTP client to make our request. You can bring that in from Angular Common HTTP. We're also going to need some headers later on for the JSON, for the posting. So let's just go ahead and look for that in our application. And this is another thing you could refactor out if you wanted, but I'm just going to put it in like this. And just bring in the HTTP headers. This won't be needed for now, but very shortly we'll be wanting to post to add a connection. So we'll just get that in there while we're working on this part here. But basically what we want to do here is we want to get a connection user. So this is going to take the ID through the URL, and we're actually going to get the user. So we can bring in the observable, and we can also bring in the user here. And recall that a user just has ID, first name, last name, email, role, image, path, and post. And this is just erroring because we're not returning anything here. So what we want to do is we just want to return, and we can use the HTTP client service. So we can use a GET request, and we can put the user here. Now if you put the type here, you don't necessarily have to specify observable user, but I like to have a type on all my functions anyway. It is implied, but it just makes it easier to look through for readability purposes. But this type here always matches the type within the observable that it's returned by. So basically we want to get our environment variable. So we do have that. So we can go ahead and we can just say we can get the base API URL, and we can say we want to send a request. So where are we sending a request to? Well, we want to send it to the, we want to get the connection user from the API. So if we just take a look at the path here, I think it's user, but we'll just confirm that. If we go into auth and we look at the user controller, we can see that we've got user here. And we also got a couple of other endpoints here. And I might actually just leave this open just so I can copy the endpoints in. So I'll put it at the front there. So that means we can go to /user and then just whatever the ID is. So we can use the template literal and pass in the ID. Now that's the HTTP request, but we need to subscribe to that and call it. And we do that from the connection profile component. So let's just have a function here called getUser. And this is going to get the user from the URL. So let's actually make a, before we even do this, let's just make a private method because we're going to need it for other method calls within this component here. And I'm going to call it get user ID from URL. So we just want to extract this 5. So it's just going to be a number that we want back here. So it's going to be an observable because we're going to, and this is where we're going to need to inject the activated route. So we can bring that in of the type activated route, bring that in. So it's just saying that we need to use that variable and return a number. So we can just go ahead and we can return this dot route, and you can get the URL, and this is an observable. So that means we can use the pipe operator to use the pipeable operators. So what I want to do is I want to go from that observable into a number. So I can just use the map operator from RxJS operators. And we're going to get the URL segment, and it's going to be in an array of segments here. So I can get the URL segment, bring that in, and this is just going to return, and we want the URL segment, and it turns out that at the beginning or in the first index we can go ahead and we can get the path variable here. So that's the part of the segment that we want. Oh, and I realize I've injected this into ng on a init. This needs to be over here, of course, in the constructor. And this is just erroring because this is going to be a string. It's coming from the URL, so it's going to be a string. But we just want a number of that. And we can just say plus here. And I might make this lowercase here as well. So we've got a nice camel case here. So now we have this method here. So let's just go ahead and just call this method. Just to make sure that it's working. So let's just say this.getUser from URL. And we're going to need to subscribe to that. And then for the number that it's returning, I just want to console log that number. And I might prefix that with a 33 so I can tell which of my comments is going to be showing that. So we see we got 33 over 5 here. Go to 3, we get 33.3, so we can see that it is extracting that value nicely. So what I want to do is, I don't actually want to do that, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. But now I'm able to get a user based on that. So I'm going to have a function here, and I'm going to call it get user, and it's going to return a user, so an observable of the user type. It's going to return, and this is where I can call this get user ID from URL, and I'm able to pipe into the result of that. And because I want a user, I actually want to use the I want to use a service here to get the, so we created in the service this get connection user method, so we're able to get the user like that. So once we get the ID from the URL, and remember that's asynchronous, so we need to change this observable into another observable of the user type. Hence we use the switch map operator here, and we've used this quite a lot already. So with the switch map, that means we're able to, we can say, well, we're getting a number back here. So the user ID that we're getting back, that's obviously a number. I'm going to import this user type and switch map operator. And what I want to do here is I want to just return, and this is where I'm going to use the, I'm going to need this service here. So if I just say private and then get the name of this service, connection profile service, bring this in, import it, and for this service we have our get connection user, and that's based on the user ID, so we can go ahead and we can just pass that in here. So now we can actually call this. So let's just go ahead and say this dot get user ID, get user, and if I just subscribe to that and console log that out, and just put a 3 here. This should make a second request for us. So now we see we get 3 here. Let's just see it works for 1 as well. And we get our 3, we get logged in as the first, well, we get the first profile. We go to 2, we get the second profile ID of 2. So we can see that it is indeed returning our user for us here. So what I want to do is I also, and I know I said I'd work on the display first UI, but I need all this data to be able to work on it, so I'm going to come back to that. So basically what I want to do is I want to create a few things here. I need to get the status of the user as well. So when I go to a user's page, I need to determine whether or not we have a friend request sent. If a friend request is sent, we want the button to be disabled. And if it's accepted or declined, I just want to hide that button. So I'm going to need the that method there. So if I go to my service here, I can have a get friend request status, and this is going to just take in the ID, which is a number, and what it's going to return for us is it's going to return an observable, and this is where we're going to need our types. So if I just open up this models here and I create a new file and I call it friend request dot TypeScript, open that up. I'm just going to go ahead and copy this in here, and I'm just going to change it up a little. So I can close this now. And in the model here, I got the friend request status, not sent, pending, accepted, decline, waiting for current user response. And then I'm also going to export the interface friend request status and also the friend request. So that's just going to be an ID, and these aren't optional in this case here. And this and this, in this case, we want it to be modified a little, so this will just be a number here for these two here. So that's that. So I can close that up now, or I can use it to refer back to the connection profile service that we're working on. So basically, we're going to return something of this type here. So a status and then the friend request status, so the type. And we're going to need to bring that in. And then we can just go ahead and we can just copy this here. So rather than user, it's going to be friend request status here. We hit the user, and then if we look at our controller here, we can see that for the status, we're hitting this friend request / receiver ID endpoint here. So if I come back to the service here, we're still in user / friend request / status, and then the ID that's getting passed in there. So if I save that, I should be able to go back to the component that I'm working on, and I'm able to use this, and I can just close this now, move this over here. I can use this get friend request status. So I'm going to have a function here called get connection status. Or get friend request status. This is going to return an observable of that type, friend request status. You can just put that in there like that. So all this is going to do is just going to return the get friend request status method that we have there, and it has no arguments. Oh, sorry, it has a argument. And actually what we want to do here to get that argument, we need to use the get user ID from profile. So basically what I want to do here is, before doing this at all, I want to say this.get user ID from URL, so I can get the ID of the user through the URL. Now I don't need to pass anything in because it's coming from the URL, so I can pipe into this, and I want to return a friend request status here, so I can just use this switch map operator, and that's going to give us our user ID of the number type. And then we want to return the new observable, which is this dot, and then this is this part here, so the get request status. So now that we have access to the ID, we can get the status of the friend request. And then we can go ahead and we can just say, okay, pass in the user ID here. Now we may just need this type in here like that. Request status. Oh, sorry, I used the wrong method here. Obviously, we're going to need to use the connection profile service, get friend request status. And now we have that, we're able to get the status of the friend request based on the URL, but we still need to actually use this. So what we can do here is we can set a couple of variables here, because we're going to need these in our component. So we're going to need the user data, so we'll have a variable called user. We're going to need the connection status, or the friend request status, and this is of the type friend request status. We're going to need the friend request status subscription, because we're going to need to subscribe to things. So I'm just going to put this $sign here as a convention for anything relating to observables. And this is of the type subscription. And we're going to need the same sort of thing in here, but we're going to need the user subscription, because this value is going to change depending each time you go to a new page or something like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually implement onDestroy, because I'm going to assign these variables. So that means I need the onDestroy method, and I need to import that from Angular core. And if I just get the name of that, and just above the private method but below all the other methods, I'm just going to have this ng onDestroy. It's not going to return anything, but basically it's going to take the subscriptions, and I know we haven't set them up just yet, but it won't error if we unsubscribe from them anyway, and we're going to shortly set them up anyway. So if I bring this down, and then rather than the user subscription here, I'm going to unsubscribe from the friend request status subscription, and don't forget the $sign. And that means what I basically want to do, rather than just console log things out, I actually want to start to set up these variables that we can use in our template. So the friend request status subscription, I'm going to assign that, and use this keyword here, and use the $sign. And when you assign it, it actually will call the method here. So if I'm saying this dot get friend request status, so getting the user ID from the URL, and then getting the status of the friend request that's in existence between the two parties. If you set this equal to that and subscribe to it, it will actually, even though you're assigning the variable, it will still do the work because you have this subscription set up equal to that, and hence you don't want any memory leaks, so you can use the ng on destroy pattern to unsubscribe from that. But since this get friend request status isn't observable and it's given us the friend request status, we can just go ahead and we can pipe into this observable here. Now we don't want to return anything here, but we actually just want to get some values and assign a few variables. So we can actually use the tap operator here, and we can bring that in. And we know that we're going to get our friend request status, and this is of this friend request status type. Now if we go ahead and we open the code block here, this is just erroring because we haven't subscribed just yet, so I could just tack on a let's see, .subscribe, and we don't need to do anything other than subscribe, so we can just have that there like that. But in this tap pipeable operator, we have the access to the friend request status, so we can say this is where we can actually set our variables here. So we can set the friend request status that we defined up here, and this is just going to be equal to the friend request status. But remember, this is a nested object, so we just want to get the status from that. And likewise, we also want to set this dot we want to actually get some information relating to the user. We want to get the user here, and then we want to set up information relating to that user so we have access to the template. But to do that, we just go ahead and this is the point where we can do it. So basically we can set our other subscription here like this, and recall that we've unsubscribed to these ahead of time. So when we set this variable, this will actually still fire the variable because we've got a subscription. So if you have a subscription and you assign it to the observable that you're subscribing to, that will indeed fire it. So we can just say this is where we want to get the user. So we can go ahead and get the user, and of course you could do this in multiple ways. You could get the user first and get the status second or anything like that. It doesn't really matter. This is happening very fast anyway, so there's no need to over engineer it or anything like that. But you can just subscribe and you can get the user, and basically I just want to set the user equal to that user that you're getting back there. Now one thing I might do here as well is I might add the property, because right now the user, it's returning the image path, but we're not getting the full image path. So I'm just going to go ahead and set a local variable here called image path, and this is going to be equal to the image path. But if that doesn't exist, we can use this double question mark. So if it does exist, it'll take the first value, but if it doesn't, recall on the back end we did have this blank profile picture.png. So you can just go ahead and have it there. You might want to refactor this out so it's not hard coded into a local variable and then get the default image, but I'm just going to leave it like this for here. Now on the user object, there doesn't exist a full image path, so we can use this sort of syntax here. So if you do dot, you get the first name, image path, and so on. But we want to append to that. So obviously you could put it onto the model and have it as an optional variable, and in hindsight that's probably a better way to do things, but you won't always be able to do that. So I just wanted to demonstrate for education purposes, you can actually just go ahead and use this syntax here. It's sort of to tack on that method there for a type, but you can override that user type and sort of have access to that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and copy the path. So it's the node localhost 3000 API/feed/image. This is where our images is going to come from, and then we can just go ahead and tack on that image path, which is either going to be defined or it's going to return our blank profile image here. So we've done quite a little bit of work here. And if we're looking at a page here, it's still looking quite the same, but now we have access to everything that we need, so we can go to a page and we can go to other users' pages as well, and we shouldn't have too many issues with that. So we've got this user, we've got this friend request status, and these will change as the subscriptions, they're looking for the changes and in the URL, and they're constantly watching those, and then further requests will be made based on those. So that means we can come back to this line here, and we're not going to have full name here, but we're going to have we can say if we have the user, because initially we won't, we can say we need the user first name and get the user last name here. So let's just go ahead and see if that's working for us. And also let's just get the image as well. We got the full image path here. So basically if if we have the user, we can use the user dot full image path, and note that we're not getting the IntelliSense for that, and that's because it's looking for the user type here. But if we wrap that with the $any keyword, and you don't want to do this too often, but we purposely set this up, we should have the image here, and now we can see we get this blank image here. And if I go to user 1, we can see that we get the user there, user image, and we get John Pink here. And if I go back, we get John 2 here. So that's rendering dynamically. So that means we have the data that we need. So let's go return to the layout of this, and then finally we'll add the functionality to add the user. So basically we need to go through the HTML and the CSS here. So we've already cleared through the HTML, but I may have got distracted with the CSS. So let's just see. We no longer need this here or this here. And once again, you could refactor the shared parts, but it's the values are sort of a lot different. You sort of might even want it in another component like I'm doing here anyway, sort of thing. So basically, the iron card here, I want to just tack on a little bit of margin here, and I want 20 pixels from the top. I want the left and right to be centered, so I'll put auto here and then nothing on the bottom. And I'm just going to change this to 782 pixels. I've roughly found these just by inspecting the elements on the LinkedIn website. But obviously that's not going to work on mobile, so we want it to be responsive. So we'll have this max width here of 960, and I've chosen 960 because that's a breakpoint in Ionic. But basically at a certain point we just want the width to be auto and the margin to be 20 pixels, so there is still going to be space left and right, and the card will just take the width of the screen, subtract the margin either side of it. So for the backdrop, we can just go ahead and just change the height of this to 196 pixels. And rather than using values here for the width, I'm going to use percentages. So that means when you move from one view to the other, the proportions will be preserved. So I'm just going to go ahead and just change a few things here. So I want the width to be 70%. Here I want the width to be only 2%. And this is just the curve part here. So basically I'm making this card bigger and I'm centering it here. And this looks about 70%. This little bit here is about 2%. And then this is the remaining part here. It's a little different in the larger view, so I've sort of just eyeballed those proportions. But nevertheless, this will be a width of 2%, height of 100% for all of them. Here we've got 70%, and then we want the remainder to add up to 30%, and this 2% just goes over the top of the backdrop too. So I might actually just make this 5% here, and I'm going to make this 25%, so that should add up nicely. One thing I want to do is I want to make the image a little bigger, and I'm just going to duplicate the height for that, so we got a circle rather than an oval shape. The margin, we no longer want it centered, so we'll get rid of that. We've got the border, we'll make that a little bigger, so the white circle around the image is a little bigger, and we'll just make it margin top go up a little bit here. So let's save this, and okay, so we can see that we've got this little thing here. So let's see what happened here. Okay, so this width here should be 25%, and then this height should still be 100%. This height should be 100%, and this should be 5%. So that may have confused you a little bit before, but hopefully this fixes things up. And then we can see we get our nice profile here, and we can see that it preserves all the way. Now one thing we want to do is we just want to left align this part here and also add the buttons below. So let's go ahead and work on that. So if I come to the template here, and I think I can close this up now. If I come to the let's see, where we have the name, what we can do is we can just say we don't even need this iron margin top anymore. We can just say iron text left. We add that class here, and then we'll do the same thing for the subtitle. There we go, we've got our left aligned image. We've still got our spacing around it. Now we just want to add the buttons, and then we can hook into the functionality that we created. So what we want to do here is in our iron card content, and you didn't have to do it laid out this way. This is just the way I've chosen to do things. But basically we have our friend request status, and if we take a look at this here, we've got these types here. So basically we want to do two things here. We want to show a button to say connect only if there's not something sent, there's no request sent. Because if something's been approved or declined, we just want to hide that button. But there could be the case that it's pending. So I could have created the request, so it will be pending from my perspective, or the other person could be waiting for my response and they've sent it. And in either of those cases, I want to, disable the button, but I still want to show it so the action can be, reach its conclusion. And I just want to grey that out because in the next video, I'm going to refactor this nav bar such that we can also respond to requests. And I'm probably just going to have a little drop down here with some names and accept or decline, and then they'll be able to make the request. But we've already scaffolded everything up pretty much to be able to do that. So it's just going to be a couple of UI changes and some more endpoints. So basically, based on that logic that I've outlined, we want to have an ngIf. Now, I don't want to have any DOM elements, so I'm just going to wrap it in a ngContainer tag. So I can just run ngIf here, and I'm going to, rather than do if connection status equals, I'm going to do includes, and then I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to get the friend request status. So if that friend request status includes, and the types we got here are not sent, pending, so if the thing hasn't been sent, we want to show it. If it's pending, we want to show it, but we want to grey it out or disable it. And we'll handle that in a moment. And then also, if we have the case where we're waiting to respond to the other user that's already sent the request, then we can go ahead and tack that on there. So this is only going to render. So basically, I could also say if it's not included in accepted and declined. So basically what I want to do here is I just want to have an iron button, and I want to bind it to the disabled property. Oops. And I'm just going to go ahead and copy this include thing because it'll save me some keystrokes, because I can just go ahead and remove not sent. Because if it's not sent by either person, well, obviously you don't want to disable it, so you want to be able to click that. But if it's sent by either party, you want to just disable it because it hasn't been approved or declined. It's in the pending state. So basically, I also just want to make the shape of this rounded. So I've already set up the color schemes in earlier videos, but this I just want to make it in the pill shape. And here in the text for it, you want to connect. It's going to depend if the connection status or the friend request status, if this is equal to waiting for current user, that means they've sent you a request. So you can say accept request. Otherwise, it means you've sent them a request or it's not sent. in which case you just want to have the word connect here. So let's just save that. And now we get this connect button here. It's not hooked up just yet, but just to finish up the UI side of things, what I want to add here is I want to add 2 more buttons that are for show. So I can just say iron button, and I'm going to have the fill equal to, is it like this, equal to outline, and I want 2 of these. So in the first one I want to have an iron icon, and I want to have a slot equal to start. I also want to have the lock icon here, and then I'll just put in a message text here. And for this other one, I also want to have a rounded shape here, so I can tuck on the attribute shape and the round for that property, and I can have more. So this should, and if I sign in, I'll sign in as user 1. I think I set my token expiry date to like, I don't know, 10 minutes or something, or 30 minutes, or I don't know. Okay, so basically, if I go to user 2 here, oh, and I want some text in here. So rather than between the icon, I want it after the icon. And there we go. We've got our UI all sorted, and it's reasonably responsive. So basically now we just want to add the ability to connect. So let's go ahead and look at how we can do that. Basically, if we return to our connection profile service here, we can have a add connection user. We're going to want the ID of that user, and we're going to want to return an observable, and the particular type of that is the or basically we're going to have a friend request here. We're going to get back the friend request, or we could be getting an error back if we have a look at the ability to post a request. We can see that we're either going to get a friend request back or this error here, so we can actually just go ahead and copy this whole thing and paste it in the observable here. So that means I can do a post method. So I can just say return this.http.post. This type's going to be the exact same. You might want to put this into its own type because it's getting a little long here, but just to keep consistent with what I've done here, I'm going to tack it in here and here as well. So basically this, unlike the get, this takes some additional parameters because we have to specify the type of the data that we're sending through if it's not in the form data or the standard type. So we want JSON. So we can just go ahead and just get that endpoint here. So friend request send. put this in here. So it's still in the user, but it's the friend request send section. Now that's the first argument. Now this is a post method, but we're sending it through the URL here, but we still need to tack on the option. So we can just have an empty body here, and then we can just call the HTTP options that we specified earlier in the video. So that's the method we need for the service. Now pretty much all we need to do now is we just need to add the user, call this function and use it in the component. So if I come to the component, I think just below this get user method, I'm going to have a add user method. So I'll have that. Now this is actually, the way this is going to work is in the HTML here, when we and that's the wrong file, when we want to click the button, so if it's not disabled, that means we're able to click it, and that means it's in a not sent state basically. So on the iron button we can actually have this click event here, and we can set it equal to add user. So we have this add user function here. So basically what's happening here is we want to get the user ID from the URL, which we can do, and based on the user ID from the URL we want to call this connection add connection user method here, and this is going to return either a friend request or an error, and based on what that is given back to us, well basically we just want to call that method, but we only want to we basically want to unsubscribe straight away, but we want to subscribe in the method call because we need to subscribe to that method to be able to get the data that we need, but we don't want to, we need to unsubscribe so we can actually just take one from that. So basically this is going to be a subscription type because we're going to subscribe to the method that we set up, and basically when you add a user, you can only add a user if they're not, if there's no request being made by either party. But when you click it, basically you want to set this dot connection or this friend request status equal to pending, because you want to disable the button. So, and you want to show those changes in the UI, and then obviously the next time you go there, you'll be making the request again. You could cache it if you wanted to, but if you're reloading the whole application again, you're going to need to you know, get the request. So we have this get user ID from URL function. We're going to pipe into that observable. We're going to use the switch map operator so we can return another observable based on data that's returned from that first observable. So we know that we're getting the user ID, which is just a number, and what we want to do here is we just want to return this dot connection profile service, and then we want to call that add connection user method by passing in the user ID we've retrieved from the previous observable. So that's all well and good, but we don't actually want to return this observable. We want to return a subscription, but we want to get another observable from the original observable. So if I just save that, it'll just format things a little. But basically, after the pipe operator, it's going to give us back the data here. So I want to actually pipe into the response here, and I only want to do so I can use this take one method. And then I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to subscribe. And because I'm taking one, it's going to handle the unsubscribe. So I don't need to put it in the ng on destroy like the other subscriptions here. But basically, if I save that, everything should be working well and good. So let's take a look at our database. If I refresh this, we get nothing in here. So I'm logged in as user 1. And let's just refresh this. So I'm going to refactor this navigation bar anyway, so don't worry about that image there. Let me just, yeah, so I got this image here in this case, but when I go to John 2, oh, maybe it was just a temporary thing. So basically I haven't made any connections just yet, but if I connect here and I refresh the database, we can see that we get a request that's been created and it's in the pending state. If I go back to the home page and I return to user 2, I can't click this. If I were to go to user 3 and connect, I'm able to connect here. And if I sign out and I log in as user 2 or user 3, I can see if I go to user 1 here, oh, I think it, okay. If I go to user 1, user 1 sent me a request. So I can have this grayed out option saying accept request. And what I want to do is I want to, in the next video, be able to handle the request. And I'm going to refactor the navigation bar and fix up a few glitches as well. But if I go back here and then I go to, say, John 5, I can now make this request here. So if I go to the database, reload this table here, we'll see that I've got 3 requests, 3 friend requests. The first 2 are created by creator 1 to user 2 and 3, and that third one, we've seen that when we went to user 1 profile, you get that other option there, and then I made a request to request 5. So yeah, thanks so much for watching the friend request system, the ability to add users and display that through the UI on LinkedIn. In the next video, I want to work on the ability to accept friend requests. So thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.